Good morning, dear people. Today we'll cover the topic 2K commitments of cognitive linguistics. So let's go. The cognitive linguistics enterprise is characterized by two fundamental commitments, and this underlie both the orientation and approach adopted by practicing cognitive linguists and the assumption and methodologies employed in the two main branches of the cognitive linguistics enterprise: cognitive semantics and cognitive approaches to grammar, discussed in further details in other videos. So first is the generalization commitment. And actually it is the first K commitment, and it represents a dedication to characterizing general principles that apply to all aspects of human language. And this goal is just a special subcase of a standard commitment in science to seek the broadest generalizations possible. In contrast to the cognitive linguistics approach, other approaches to the study of language often separate the language faculty into distinct areas such as phonology, semantics, pragmatics, morphology, syntax, and so on. As a consequence, there is often little basis for generalization across these aspects of language or for study of their interrelations. That is particularly true of formal linguistics. Formal linguistics attempt to model language by positing explicit mechanical devices or procedures operating on theoretical primitives in order to produce all the possible grammatical sentences of a given language. Such approaches typically attempt precise formulations by adopting formalisms inspired by computer science, mathematics, and logic. Formal linguistics is embodied most notably by the work of Noam Chomsky and the paradigm of generative grammar, as well as the tradition known as formal semantics, inspired by philosopher of language Richie Montag. Within formal linguistics, it is usually argued that areas such as phonology, semantics, and syntax concern significantly different kinds of structure and principles operating over different kinds of primitives. For instance, a syntax module is an area in the mind connected with structuring words into sentences, whereas a phonology module is concerned with structuring sounds into patterns permitted by the rules of any given language, and by human language in general. This modular view of mind reinforces the idea that modern linguistics is justified in separating the study of language into distinct sub-disciplines, not only on grounds of practicality, but because the components of language are wholly distinct and, in terms of organization, incommensurable. Cognitive linguists acknowledge that it may often be useful to treat areas such as syntax, semantics, and phonology as being notionally distinct. However, given the generalization commitment, cognitive linguists do not start with the assumption that the modules or subsystems of language are organized in significantly divergent ways, or indeed that wholly distinct modules even exist. Thus, the generalization commitment represents a commitment to openly investigating how the various aspects of linguistic knowledge emerge from a common set of human cognitive abilities upon which they draw, rather than assuming that they are produced in encapsulated modules of the mind. The generalization commitment has concrete subsequences for studies of language. First, cognitive linguistic studies focus on what is common among aspects of language, seeking to reuse successful methods and explanations across these aspects. For instance, just as the word meaning displays prototype effects, there are better and worse examples of reference of given words related in particular ways, so various studies have applied to the same principles to the organization of morphology, syntax, and phonology. Generalizing successful explanations across domains of language isn't just a good scientific practice, it is also the way biology works. We're using existing structures for new purposes, both in evolutionary and developmental timescales. Second, cognitive linguistic approaches often take a vertical rather than a horizontal approach to the study of language. Language can be seen as composed of a set of distinct layers of organization: the sound structure, the set of words composed by these sounds, the syntactic structures these words are constitutive of, and so on. If we array these layers one on top of the next as they unroll over time, then modular approaches are horizontal in the sense that they take one layer and study it internally, just as a horizontal slice of cake. Vertical approaches get a richer view of language by taking a vertical slice of language. which includes phonology, morphology, syntax, and of course a healthy dollop of semantics on top. A vertical slice of language is necessarily more complex in some ways than a horizontal one. It is more varied and textured, but at the same time it affords possible explanations that are simply unavailable from a horizontal modular perspective. The next one is a cognitive commitment, and the second commitment is termed cognitive because it represents a commitment to providing a characterization of the general principles for language that accord with what is known about the mind and brain from other disciplines. It is this commitment that makes cognitive linguistics cognitive, and thus an approach which is fundamentally interdisciplinary in nature. Just as the generalization commitment leads to the search for principles of language structure that hold across all aspects of language, in a related manner, the cognitive commitment represents the view that principles of linguistic structure should reflect what is known about human cognition from the other cognitive and brain sciences, particularly psychology, artificial intelligence, cognitive neuroscience, and philosophy. In other words, the cognitive commitment asserts that models of language and linguistic organization proposed should reflect what is known about the human mind, rather than purely aesthetic dictates such as the use of particular kinds of formalisms or economy of representation. The cognitive commitment has a number of concrete ramifications. First, linguistic theories cannot include structures or processes that violate known properties of the human cognitive systems. For instance, if sequential derivation of syntactic structures violates time constraints provided by actual human language processing, then it must be jettisoned. Second, models that use known existing properties of human cognition to explain language phenomena are more parsimonious than those that are built from a priori simplicity matrix. For example, quite a lot is known about human categorization in a theory that reduces word meaning to the same mechanism responsible for categorization in other cognitive domains is simpler than one that hypothesizes a separate system for capturing lexical semantics. Finally, it is incumbent upon the cognitive linguistic researcher to find convergent evidence for the cognitive reality of components of any proffered model of explanation, whether or not this research is conducted by the cognitive linguist. Thank you very much for your attention. See you in next video. Goodbye.